The interview room, humiliation, the conference room, on the 14th floor of Meridian. Tech gleamed with the kind of sterile perfection that spoke of money and power. Chrome fixtures reflected the afternoon sun, and the air conditioning hummed softly, keeping the temperature at an exact 72 degrees. Sophia Chen sat at the head of the long glass table, her designer blazer crisp and her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her leather portfolio. At 28, she had climbed higher and faster than anyone else in the company's human resources department, and she wore her success like armor. Today was another round of interviews for the senior engineering position, a role that would help shape the future of their artificial intelligence division. Sophia had already dismissed 3 candidates that morning, each one failing to meet her exacting standards. She glanced at her watch, a sleek piece that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and sighed with practiced annoyance. The next candidate was late, which in her mind was already a mark against them. When the door finally opened, Sophia's eyes widened, not with interest but with barely concealed disbelief. An elderly man shuffled into the room, his movements careful and measured. He wore a suit that had clearly seen better days, the fabric slightly shiny at the elbows, the cutout dated by at least 2 decades. His hair was silver white, thinning at the crown, and deep lines creased his weathered face. He carried a worn leather portfolio that looked older than Sophia herself. This was Thomas Rivera, and he was 73 years old. Sophia exchanged glances with her 2 colleagues on the interview panel, Daniel Park and Jennifer Wu. Daniel raised his eyebrows slightly, while Jennifer stifled what might have been a laugh behind her hand. Sophia felt a familiar rush of superiority wash over her. This was going to be entertaining. At least Thomas settled into the chair across from them with a quiet grace, placing his portfolio carefully on the table. His hands, Sophia noticed with distaste, were rough and marked with age spots. She could not imagine those hands operating the sophisticated technology their company developed. The very idea seemed almost laughable. Without waiting for him to speak, Sophia leaned back in her chair, her expression one of thinly veiled amusement. She had perfected this look over years of interviews, the one that said she was already bored before the conversation even began. "Mr. Rivera," she began, deliberately mispronouncing his last name with a flat American accent that stripped away its Spanish musicality. "I have to say, this is quite unusual. You do realize this position requires someone who can keep up with cutting-edge technology, don't you? Someone who understands artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks. This isn't exactly a role for someone looking for a comfortable place to coast into retirement." Thomas met her gaze with calm brown eyes that held neither anger nor shame. He simply nodded slightly, as if acknowledging that she had spoken. Though he made no move to defend himself, Sophia continued, warming to her performance. "I mean, no offense, but when was the last time you actually worked with modern programming languages? Do you even know what Python is? Or are you still thinking about punch cards and COBOL?" She smiled at her own joke, and Daniel chuckled obligingly beside her. Jennifer, to her credit, looked slightly uncomfortable. "Sophia, maybe we should let him present his qualifications first before—" "Well, I'm sure his qualifications are very impressive," Sophia interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "For 1985, perhaps, but this is Meridian Tech. We're building the future here, not running a retirement home for has-been engineers." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Sophia felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. She was simply being efficient, saving everyone time. There was no way this old man could possibly be qualified for a role this demanding. She was doing him a favor by cutting the interview short. Thomas remained silent through her tirade, his expression unchanged. There was something in his stillness that was almost unnerving, a quality of patience that seemed infinite. He did not fidget, did not argue, did not make excuses. He simply waited, as if he knew something that Sophia did not. "You know what?" Sophia said, gathering her papers with exaggerated movements. "I think we can conclude this interview right now. Thank you for coming in, but I don't think you're what we're looking for. We need innovators, not relics from the past. I'm sure you understand." It was then that Thomas finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. the gentle strength that filled the room more effectively than Sophia's cutting remarks ever could. "May I show you something before I go?" he asked simply. Sophia rolled her eyes, but gestured impatiently. "If you must, but make it quick. I have actual qualified candidates to interview this afternoon." Thomas opened his worn leather portfolio with movements that were deliberate and unhurried. Inside was a manila folder, slightly yellowed with age, but meticulously organized. He slid it across the glass table toward Sophia with a gentle push. "I think you should read this," he said softly. Sophia snatched up the folder with an exasperated sigh, fully expecting to find some outdated resume filled with ancient credentials that meant nothing in the modern world. Jennifer and Daniel leaned in slightly, curious despite themselves. Sophia opened the folder, her eyes scanning the first page with the kind of dismissive speed that came from someone who had already made up their mind. But then her eyes caught on a name, a company, a date. Her rapid scanning slowed, then stopped completely. Her expression shifted from bored superiority to confusion, then to something that might have been shock. The first document was a patent. Not just any patent, but one that Sophia recognized immediately. It was foundational to the very technology that Meridian Tech built its entire business upon, the neural network architecture that powered their flagship artificial intelligence system, the one that had made the company billions. Had its roots in this patent, and the name listed as the primary inventor filed 35 years ago was Thomas Miguel Rivera. Sophia's hands began to tremble slightly as she turned the page. There was another patent, and another. Awards from institutions she recognized as the most prestigious in the field. Publications in journals that were legendary in computer science circles. Letters of recommendation from names that made her breath catch. Scientists and engineers who were spoken of with reverence. Pioneers who had built the digital world from nothing then. She found the photographs. A younger Thomas Rivera, his hair still dark, standing with a team of researchers in front of early computers that filled entire rooms. Thomas shaking hands with technology executives whose companies had become household names. Thomas receiving medals and honors at ceremonies that Sophia had only read about in textbooks. The portfolio told a story that made Sophia's earlier words echo in her mind with horrifying clarity. Thomas Rivera was not some desperate old man hoping for one last job before retirement. He was a legend in the field, someone whose work had literally created the foundation upon which modern artificial intelligence was built. He had been there at the beginning, not as an observer, but as one of the architects who had designed the future, and Sophia had mocked him, called him a relic, suggested he belonged in a retirement home rather than contributing to cutting-edge technology. The blood drained from Sophia's face as the full weight of her mistake crashed down upon her. Daniel and Jennifer had moved closer, reading over her shoulder, and she could feel their shock radiating like heat. The room seemed to have grown colder. Or perhaps it was just the chill of recognition settling into Sophia's bones. Thomas sat quietly across from them, his weathered hands folded, his expression gentle and without judgment. He was not gloating, not smirking, not throwing her words back in her face. He simply waited, with that same infinite patience. For her to understand what she had done, Sophia looked up from the folder, her eyes meeting Thomas's, and for the first time in her career, she had absolutely no idea what to say. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her legendary confidence, completely shattered by the truth contained in those yellowed pages. The file was still open on the table between them, filled with evidence of a life dedicated to innovation, creativity, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. It was a testament to brilliance that had shaped the modern world. Carried humbly in a worn leather portfolio by a man who had never needed to prove himself because his work spoke louder than any words ever could. And Sophia Chen, who prided herself on her ability to identify talent and potential, had been too blind to see the genius sitting right in front of her. The truth revealed. The silence in the conference room stretched like elastic pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Sophia's perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she continued turning pages in the folder. Each document a hammer blow to her ego. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass walls seemed to have shifted, no longer flattering but exposing. A Illuminating every uncomfortable detail of the moment, Jennifer Wu broke the silence first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Rivera," she said, emphasis on the title that Sophia had never bothered to use. "I apologize. We had no idea who you were. Your resume that came through our system, it was just listed as engineering experience." There were no details about Thomas. Raised one weathered hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "The resume was intentionally simple," he said, his voice carrying the patient wisdom of someone who had nothing left to prove. "I wanted to see if your company valued experience and capability, or just impressive credentials on paper. I wanted to know if I would be judged by my work or by my appearance." The words landed softly, but their impact was devastating. Sophia felt her stomach twist with shame. She had failed the test spectacularly, revealing not just her ignorance but her cruelty. Every cutting remark she had made now played back in her mind like a recording she could not stop. Daniel Park, usually quick with smooth corporate responses, seemed at a loss. He shuffled through the papers spread before them, stopping at a publication from the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. "You wrote the foundational paper on adaptive neural networks," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I studied this in graduate school. My entire dissertation built on your work. You're the Thomas Rivera, the pioneer of machine learning algorithms." Thomas nodded modestly. "That was a long time ago. But learning does not stop when you reach a certain age, Mr. Park. I have continued to research, to develop, to innovate. In fact, I have 3 patents pending right now for improvements to the very systems your company currently uses. I thought perhaps Meridian Tech might be interested in bringing that knowledge in-house rather than licensing it from an external entity." "Eh?" Sophia's eyes widened further. The implications were staggering. If Thomas Rivera held patents that could improve their core technology, he was not just a qualified candidate. He was potentially the most valuable person who could walk through their door. And she had insulted him, dismissed him, treated him like he was worthless. The leather portfolio contained more treasures that Sophia continued to uncover with shaking hands. There were letters from CEOs of tech giants thanking Thomas for his consultation work. There were academic honors from universities across 3 continents. There was even a faded newspaper clipping from 1992, showing Thomas receiving a presidential medal for his contributions to technology and his national competitiveness. But what struck Sophia most was not the accolades or the achievements. It was the dates. Thomas had never stopped working, never stopped creating, never stopped pushing forward. While Sophia had assumed that someone his age must be outdated and irrelevant, the truth was that Thomas Rivera had been innovating continuously for 5 decades. His most recent patent application was dated just 3 months ago. Jennifer gathered her courage and spoke again. "Dr. Rivera, I have to ask, why did you apply to work here at all? With your credentials, you could consult for any company in the world. You could name your price. Why would you want a position working for us?" Thomas smiled for the first time since entering the room, a gentle expression that transformed his weathered face. "Because I am tired of working alone," he said simply. "I have spent the last 10 years as an independent researcher, working from my home office, filing patents, publishing papers. But innovation happens best in collaboration, in the exchange of ideas between minds of different generations. I have knowledge and experience. Your young engineers have energy and fresh perspectives. Together, we could create something remarkable." The beauty of his vision hung in the air, making Sophia's earlier mockery seem even more petty and small. He had not come seeking charity or an easy retirement position. He had come offering a gift, the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime dedicated to pushing technology forward. And he wanted to share it with a new generation. Sophia finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse and unsteady. "Dr. Rivera, I owe you an apology. A profound apology. What I said to you was inexcusable. I judged you based on your age and appearance without giving you any chance to demonstrate your capabilities. I was arrogant, disrespectful, and wrong. Completely wrong." Thomas met her gaze with those calm brown eyes, and Sophia saw no anger there. Only a deep sadness that somehow felt worse than rage would have. Ms. Chen, he said quietly, you are not the first person to look at me and see only an old man who has outlived his usefulness. Society teaches us to discard people once they reach a certain age, to assume that gray hair means obsolete thinking. But some of the greatest innovations in history have come from people in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. Experience is not a liability. It is a treasure if only people would take the time to recognize it. His words were gentle, but they cut deeper than any harsh rebuke could have. Sophia felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, a sensation she had not experienced in a professional setting since her first nervous interview fresh out of college. She had built her career on being sharp, decisive, and uncompromising. But in this moment, she saw clearly how those qualities had twisted into something ugly. Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. Dr. Rivera, please do not judge our entire company by this interview. Ms. Chen's views do not represent Meridian Tech's values. We would be honored, truly honored, if you would consider joining our team. Not just in the position you applied for, but in any capacity you would like. Chief Innovation Officer, Senior Research Fellow. Whatever title and role would allow you to share your knowledge with us. Thomas was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from Daniel to Jennifer to finally resting on Sophia. She felt the weight of that look, the assessment happening behind those patient eyes. She had the terrible feeling that he was deciding not just whether to accept a job offer, but whether to give her a second chance to prove she was better than the person she had revealed herself to be. I will consider your offer, Thomas said finally, but I need to think carefully about whether this is the right environment for me. I have learned over the years that workplace culture matters more than salary or title. I need to work with people who value collaboration, who respect diverse perspectives, who understand that innovation comes from unlikely places. His eyes lingered on Sophia just a moment longer than necessary. The implication was clear. He was giving them a chance, but he was also setting a standard. If they wanted the privilege of his knowledge and experience, they would need to prove they deserved it. Jennifer jumped in quickly, sensing the opportunity slipping away. Dr. Rivera, would you allow us to arrange a meeting with our CEO, Marcus Bennett? I think he would want to speak with you personally about how we could structure a role that would be mutually beneficial, and perhaps a tour of our research facilities. I think you would be impressed by the work our engineers are doing, and they would be absolutely thrilled to meet you. Thomas nodded slowly. That would be acceptable. I am staying in the city for the next few days. You can reach me at the number on my resume. He gathered his portfolio, carefully placing the manila folder back inside, and stood with the same measured grace he had shown throughout the entire encounter as he moved toward the door. Sophia found herself standing abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Dr. Rivera, please wait, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I just want you to know that I've learned something today. A lesson I clearly needed to learn. I let my pride and my assumptions blind me to the truth. I promise you, if you decide to join Meridian Tech, I will work every day to prove that I can be better than the person you met in this interview. Thomas paused at the door, his hand on the handle. He turned back, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. Ms. Chen, the fact that you can recognize your mistake and acknowledge it puts you ahead of many people in your position. We all carry prejudices we do not realize we have until they are exposed. What matters is what we do after that moment of recognition. I hope you will use this as an opportunity to grow, to question your assumptions, to look deeper than surfaces. With that, he opened the door and walked out, his steps steady and sure, leaving behind 3 people who sat in stunned silence. After the door closed, the conference room felt different, as if the air itself had been changed by what had transpired. Jennifer was the first to move, gathering the papers that Sophia had spread across the table. We need to call Marcus immediately, she said, her voice urgent. If we lose Dr. Rivera because of this interview, it will be the biggest mistake this company has ever made. Daniel nodded vigorously. Agreed, Sophia. I think you should probably step back from this recruitment. Let Jennifer and I handle the follow-up with Dr. Rivera, given what happened. It might be better if no, Sophia interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. No, I need to be part of making this right. I was the one who failed here, and I need to be part of the solution. I will speak with Marcus myself, explain what happened, and take full responsibility. And if Dr. Rivera does decide to join us, I want to be the first person to welcome him properly, to show him that I meant what I said about learning and growing. Jennifer studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but Sophia, this needs to be a real change, not just words to save face. Dr. Rivera was right about workplace culture. We cannot build an innovative company if we dismiss people based on age or appearance or any other superficial criteria. This has to be a wake-up call for all of us. Sophia sank back into her chair. The adrenaline that had been coursing through her body during the confrontation now fading, leaving her feeling exhausted and emotionally raw. She looked at the empty chair where Thomas had sat. At the spot on the table where his worn portfolio had rested, she thought about all the candidates she had dismissed over the years with barely a second thought. How many had she judged too quickly? How many talented people had she overlooked because they did not fit her narrow definition of what success should look like? The questions were uncomfortable, forcing her to confront truths about herself she had avoided examining. That evening, Sophia sat alone in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen. She had pulled up Thomas Rivera's published research, articles spanning 5 decades. As she read, she was struck by the elegance of his thinking, the way he could explain complex concepts with clarity and insight. His most recent paper, published just last year in a prestigious journal, proposed a revolutionary approach to ethical AI, development that had the potential to reshape how the entire industry thought about machine learning, and she had called him a relic. The memory made her physically wince. She had been so certain of her own importance, so convinced that youth and ambition were the only qualities that mattered in the tech industry. Thomas Rivera had shattered that illusion completely, revealing it for the shallow thinking it truly was. 3 days later, Sophia stood outside Marcus Bennett's office, her heart pounding. She had requested the meeting, determined to confess her mistake before someone else reported it. She owed that much to Thomas and to herself. Marcus listened to her story with an expression that grew increasingly grave. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Sophia," he said finally, "you have always been one of our most effective recruiters. But effectiveness without wisdom is dangerous. Dr. Rivera could have sued us for age discrimination. He could have gone to the press and made this a public relations nightmare. Instead, he handled the situation with grace and gave us a chance to make it right. That says more about his character than 1,000 interviews could reveal." Sophia nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I know, and I want to help make it right, if you'll let me." Marcus studied her carefully. "Dr. Rivera has agreed to meet with me tomorrow. If he joins our company, and I sincerely hope he does, you will be required to complete extensive training on unconscious bias and inclusive hiring practices. Additionally, I want you to work directly with Dr. Rivera on integrating his research with our development teams. You need to learn from him, not just about technology, but about humility and respect. Can you do that?" "Yes," Sophia said without hesitation. "I can and I will." 2 weeks later, Dr. Thomas Rivera accepted a position at Meridian Tech as Chief Innovation Advisor. His first day was marked not by a quiet arrival, but by an all-hands meeting where Marcus Bennett introduced him to the entire company. As Thomas stood before hundreds of employees, sharing his vision for collaborative innovation, Sophia sat in the front row, listening with a humility she had never possessed before. After the meeting, she approached him nervously. "Dr. Rivera, I want to thank you for giving me a second chance. I promise I will honor the trust you are placing in this company." Thomas smiled, that same gentle expression that transformed his weathered face. "Ms. Chen, everyone deserves the opportunity to grow beyond their mistakes. I look forward to working with you." He extended his hand, and Sophia shook it, feeling the roughness of his palm, the strength that came from decades of hard work and dedication in that moment. She understood that she was holding the hand not of an old man past his prime, but of a master who had chosen to share his knowledge with those humble enough to learn, and she vowed to be worthy of that gift. The story of the interview spread through Meridian Tech, becoming legendary. but it was remembered not as a tale of humiliation, but as a lesson about the danger of judging others based on superficial qualities. Thomas Rivera became beloved at the company, his insights revolutionizing their approach to AI development. And Sophia Chen became one of his most dedicated students, transformed by the day when an old man opened his file and changed everything.